Hello, everyone. Welcome to the AI reality check. We're going to take about 20-25 minutes to walk you through some urgent thoughts and observations about artificial intelligence and what it's doing to work. There are really three things that we want to get across, but this really does feel like a moment in time where we need to step back, step out of the mayhem of all of the things that are happening across the world, and even just within artificial intelligence, and say, look, what's going on? What's really going on? Explain a little bit about what all of these words flying around actually mean about agents, and give some practical advice. Now, that's quite ambitious for 20 minutes. So the rules are here that I'm going to try and stay away from jargon as much as possible and just explain in real terms based on the evidence and that we're seeing out there. And there's lots of evidence and it's mixed, but on our interpretation, what we're seeing both out in the market with our clients and in the way that we're working at Brilliant Noise, what's happening, what it means, and what we can do. And I think many of you will pick up on signs and signals as to why this is an urgent message and why this is a real moment. We've seen viral memos, we've seen all sorts of big stats floating around. It's so hard in the moment to cut through what we call the fog of revolution, to see what's actually going on all around us. But we know that something's going on, so let's try and make sense of it together. This is a concise version, really, of a 90-minute briefing we're doing for some of our clients at the moment. These are the three things that have changed, three really important things that have changed. Can't really be definitive or prescriptive at the moment, but these stand out. First of all, there's what was called the SaaS apocalypse, which is a very emotive and tabloidy headline, but it's basically referring to the corrections or the adjustments in valuations of software companies and a lot of information companies and professional services companies as well, including in the sector that we came from, marketing services. So software company valuations, though, especially in the SaaS model, which is your Salesforce, Workday, all of those kind of things that we pay monthly subscriptions for at enterprises. The value of those is being fundamentally questioned. Agents, which have come along, can do what they can do. They can also make versions of them, which is interesting. The second thing, and these are provocative, and I've put them in scare quotes because you have to be critical at this moment in time. You have to be skeptical, not cynical, but skeptical. No, what does this actually mean? Who's saying what? This is a quote from a man called Boris Cherny, who was credited as being the creator of Claude Code, which is a type of AI agent that's being used a lot in the software industry, and latterly Claude Cowork, which is kind of like a very powerful agent, one of the most powerful agents out there for everyday work, and that we're using all the time now. Brilliant Noise. It's only been out a few weeks. But he said on an interview recently that coding has been largely solved. That's such a Silicon Valley thing to say. And honestly, if you watch the interview with him, he's not your average tech pro. He's very nice. He's very humble. But he's saying that coding's been largely solved. And what he means by that is that he and a lot of his peers no longer need to actually write code. Some of them choose to, but many of them don't need to anymore, and their job is changing as a result. And what that means for us as normal people is that actually a lot of that power of being able to code is becoming available to everyone. And I want to move beyond buzzy phrases like vibe coding and things like that, and just say, like, what it's meant for us in working practice is that the gap between having an idea for how things should work and actually being able to make something that helps people work in that way has just gone. That's what it actually means. We don't have to argue about whether coding's dead or any of these dramatic. All of these things are really unhelpful, polarizing headlines. But what it means on a daily basis is that it's available to a lot more people, and it's changing that profession of software engineer, of coder, of those professions, I suppose. So coding's largely solved, and we've got a follow-on question from that. And then the third thing is that agents, and I've mentioned agents in both of those other things, but agents have been unleashed. What I mean by that is that a year ago, literally a year ago, we were giving briefings like this one to clients, and we were saying agents could be important, but we haven't felt it yet. And that's our judge. It's like we haven't felt the change. We've heard the theory, we've heard big claims, but we haven't seen it. We haven't had hands-on time with it. But just remind you, that was only a year ago. And actually, that time only a year ago, though Claude Code was just being started as an app, it's now a $2 billion a year business in revenue, not in valuation, in terms of people paying for it. But a year ago, advertising and marketing, our alma mater, the sector we came from, was supposed to be the sector that was furthest ahead in terms of what it was doing with AI. And now I think it's unarguable that coding as a sector has leaped ahead. So again, just not who's winning, who's first, it's just how quickly things can change. Agents now are the whole game in terms of what's happening. And so we're going to explain them a bit to you, give our perspective, and that hopefully it's useful. One of the reasons that we decided to do this at quite short notice and just to mark this moment in time was the market ructions, especially during February, where the JP Morgan analyst estimated that $2 trillion had been lost in market capitalization from software companies in the US mainly. What does that mean? I mean, it's a big number. Oh, shall we panic? Well, what it means is, if we drill down into it, is that the people with money who are investing and want returns have seen the new technology, the new things, and it was around this time that Claude's co-work was being released and plugins were being released, which is a very interesting way of organizing your work that we're going to get into and is available to everyone right now, which is amazing. But people had seen these things and thought, oh my gosh, no, this is even easier than we thought. I think this tech is even better than we thought. And therefore, that old model, not even that old tech, SaaS isn't a tech, it's a business model, but that way of selling software to people on a per seat license, that's not as valuable anymore. People are building it themselves and it's getting easier and easier to build it themselves. So we think we need to adjust the prices of those companies. If we're going to anthropomorphize a market and ascribe a kind of meaning to it, that's probably the clearest meaning to that drop of $2 trillion. We're also seeing AI showing up in the numbers, in the productivity numbers. This is just over the last week. And we'll put references to these things in the document. So I'm not going to get into super detail, but there's a lot of economists arguing over where we're seeing productivity changes and whether you're able to see them at the moment. There's very persuasive evidence over the last week that we're seeing an uplift of around 2.2% above what was predicted for US productivity. And that's significant enough that more economists are actually switching their view from we can't see AI in the productivity numbers yet to here it is. If you read a little bit about that and about their arguments about it, what's interesting is that you can see AI productivity boosts really clearly in micro studies, as they call them, and you're not able to see them in the big numbers, the macro studies. And the reason for that is that it's really complicated, even just within a company, to measure those productivity increases. Also, that some companies where you're measuring those things, people are giving training and helping people through and re-engineering processes to take advantage of AI. It's fascinating because it's like, actually, these studies that are trying to find productivity are kind of giving us an instruction manual for what it looks like when you actually want to unlock the benefits of AI in an organization. And I will be shot for this because it's not on brand, but this is a slide which was produced for me by Google Notebook LM in the process of this. And I just thought it was so elegantly put that it was useful. This is one of the things that economists are noting when they're doing these micro studies, is that when AI is adopted within an organization, there is a productivity J curve. So actually productivity often dips for a while, for a couple of months before the gains are realized, because people are training, people are getting things wrong, making mistakes, and then realizing that what they need to do is reorganize the processes, reorganize the work around what's possible now. And that's just something to bear in mind as well. So many lessons from these things that are just really interesting. So agents like Claude Cowork were the spark of panic in the markets, or the spark of suddenly we need to own less of those shares and more of those shares. I think a lot of people were expecting a pop in the bubble of AI, but it turns out the pop in the bubble was in the bubble of people thinking that AI was no big deal. It is a really big deal. That's my sober opinion. You don't need to understand agents necessarily. I was really inspired actually by an article which my colleague Stephanie sent to me over the weekend, which was someone explaining again to their friends how to build agents within Claude Cowork. And every other line, it kind of works like this, but you don't need to worry about that because you just have to ask the AI and it will sort it out for you. So you don't actually need to understand the detail of agents. I think it's helpful too. If you want to, it's great. But basically, you suddenly can have an army of them working for you every day, which sounds hyperbolic, and we're trying to stay away from hyperbole. But what I mean by that is just talking to an agent like Claude Cowork, it will automatically, and it won't even tell you some of the time, create sub-agents that go off and do things for you. So I'll give you an example that's that's really quite straightforward. I found a book online that was by the Swiss government about cognitive biases, and it was only available in German. And I asked them to convert it for me to translate it for me into English. It was around 12,000 words, so it wasn't an enormous document, but there were several chapters. It was going to take a while. And what the agent did was create one agent per chapter to translate that, and it all happened in parallel. So it was very, very quick. And it also had another agent then checking the work afterwards. So you might think in that instance of an agent just being something that has a set of specialist instructions. So what makes agents different from kind of the GPTs, the GEMs, and unfortunately what Copilot calls agents but aren't agents, the things where you put a prompt and a little bit of data in, or your project in Claude or in ChatGPT, what makes them different from that is it's not just it's not like just a conversation. It's not just turn-based. You ask it, it responds, you ask, it responds. You give it a brief, it checks the brief, it goes off and does it. That's what an agent is. And it used to be theoretical, and now it's actually just becoming part of work. Just switch over actually to a video here. I'm going to just show you a little video. So this is Claude Cowork, and this is really my actual daily thing. And there's me typing, let's start the day. And I'm saying, let's go. And this is real time, so I haven't speeded this up, but it does take a little while. And you can see on the left-hand side over here, I've also been building an analytics database for my blog, which is a mouthful and is very technical, but I don't need to understand that because the agents do. It's basically, it's making an analysis of my blog. So you can see this agent is able to use tools. So it's able to use these tools here, Google Calendar, Asana, and Gmail. And it's gone off and it's checked what's in there. And I might just fast forward this slightly, but it's checking what's in there. It's saying you've got these things on. It's having a think about that. It's also got a little note there, a skill called Chief of Staff Daily, which is, when I say a skill, that's literally just a page of plain text writing where I've explained to it what I want it to do every day for me. What's really interesting here is it's telling me all the things I need from all of those sources without me having to go and look at them. So I'm not going Gmail, Asana, Calendar. It's going, look, these are the things, and look, these are the priorities. And also I've put a little thing in there about I don't like back-to-back meetings, and I tend to sort of like get a bit burnouty if I do too many things all at once. So it's like, just have a think about the energy through the day. So that's nice. That's a very simple example of an agent. And you can see on the left-hand side here, these are literally the things that I've been doing with it. And yeah, let's go back to the presentation. So it's able to figure things out with some instructions, and it's able to go off and do things and make decisions. They're not always right. It doesn't get everything perfect, but it feels, and I think pay attention to feelings when you're using these things, it feels very calm. It feels a lot calmer than a normal way to start the day. And that's what we're noticing more and more. If you get the agents set up right to do things, they're great. And I appreciate not everybody here has access to something like Claude Cowork in their working environment. You might be in a Microsoft only environment, or you might just be using ChatGPT or Gemini. These things are coming. They're coming to all of you. And a lot of them are achievable within your current environments if you just have a think about what you want and you have a chat with the AI and try and set them up. So my point here, though, is that the agents aren't some incredible technical marvel behind the scenes. They're a set of tools that the AI can use, and there are a set of rules that the AI has to abide by. Which brings us on to one of the other things that's been happening dramatically out there, and another reason why this is a moment, is we can now see what happens when there are no rules and you give a computer all the tools, and it's called OpenClaw. And some of you may have been aware of OpenClaw, so I'm just going to skip through to, I've got some headlines here I wanted to show. This is what happens when you have all the tools and no rules. So you can see in my agent had access to my calendar and to my task listing, and feel comfortable with that. But with OpenClaw, which is this open source, incredibly popular thing and incredibly dangerous, do not download this unless you are extremely technically savvy. Don't download it, but find out about it. You might have heard of the AIs that were starting social networks, incredibly insecure, doing all sorts of crazy things. OpenAI hired the guy who wrote it and created an open source foundation for OpenClaw. And I saw this morning that Meta's actually bought this strange social network where all the agents can go and chat to each other. It's very uncanny, but get past the hype and the headlines. What it is a glimpse of what agents can do, will be able to do in the future. What has happened with Peter Steinberger being hired at OpenAI, who created this, is they want him to make one of these for everyone. And the tools that it has access to, when I say all the tools, I mean, it can control the whole computer. It can write software. It can go shopping, do all the things. So agents are tools and rules. The model and the software, and this is like what I really want to emphasize as well about what's practical to do in this moment, is we get a lot of questions about which tool to use, which model's best. I think if we've learned anything over the last year, it's the models are not as important as understanding how your processes work, what data you've got, and how you want agents to work, how you want to work with them. The model actually matters less than we think. The harness, and this is the one, I say one technical term, we've talked about agents and we've talked about, so the harness is a technical term. So Claude Cowork essentially and OpenClaw, all of these agents aren't a new type of AI. They're rules and tools that have been attached to AIs, and they're thought of as harnesses, and they're called harnesses. So understanding what kind of harness we want to make for AI gives us a sense. Maybe we're thinking of it as like a harness on a horse. Well, in that case, the harness gives us a lot of control, enables us to direct the power of the beast, but also kind of suggests that we need to think about stirrups and how to ride the animal as well. But let's not get lost in that metaphor. The model matters a lot less than people think. They are still getting more powerful. They are really, really interesting. But where unlocking its potential comes down to what rules are we going to give it and what tools are we going to give it. Because just to really emphasize that, OpenClaw isn't using any other kind of model than the one that we're using at work or that you're using at work. It can use any model, in fact, in there. You can use Claude, you can use OpenAI, ChatGPT, Qwen from China, all sorts of models. It's the way that it's been set up. So if you've talked with us before, you'll know that we talk a lot about the literacy ladder and trying to get people up the literacy ladder at work. I think a lot of organizations have made it to level 2 now, where people are able to use GPTs, they're able to prompt well, they're using gems or projects within ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, those other apps, and that's great. But it's time now to push up into working with agents. And what we're seeing with OpenClaw, and I think a lot of experimentation that we're doing around the edges with Claude and similar things, is what happens when you have multi-agent systems. So what happens when you not only don't have to check your email and your calendar in the morning, but you don't have to check your CRM and your HR database. All of those things can be connected with agents that are talking to you. So that's where the experimentation is. Where everybody really needs to get to at the moment is understanding what it is to work with agents, understanding how much control they can have, and understanding that getting there is really about explaining things clearly to machines rather than any kind of technical knowledge. So as you kind of climb up the metaphorical ladder, though, I think one of the things that you see is that one of the things that we experience is that we can suddenly see and understand what's coming next at each stage. So that's another reason to not just be satisfied with, I've got a helpful kind of assistant AI with that's able to do my summaries and my meetings and my emails for me, but saying, no, how does it actually help me to run things? How does it help me to stop having to go to so many meetings or to crawl through so many documents before I get to the stuff I need? I'm just going to suggest 3 things that you might want to do. These are not technical. They are things that you can achieve in any organization, but just find any task that you've got and use an agent like Claude Code. I'd say one of the things we say is, like, as well, as if you're in a secure environment, you've got 3 options to get around this. 1, use a sandbox. Ask IT if they can give you a place where you can safely test this. The other thing is to negotiate with IT or security to give you some kind of fictional universe that you can work in. So what we do, and AI is very good at this, is just make up a load of data for a company that's similar to ours, and then we can test it in a safe place. But do that, run a real task through it, and measure how much faster it is. And then this week, so these is kind of like personal, team, organization levels, but this week, spend some time thinking about and talking about with your team about where you're currently using AI. And if you can be honest about, when you're using stuff that's outside of the company as well, that's really helpful, because what you want to do is get a map of where the needs are and where there are blockers, and you can make a plan from that. And I think that if you want to be bold, then this quarter, one thing that you can do is work with AI agents to build a little system that can do something that your CRM or your finance software or something, not to replace it, but just run it in parallel and see how effective it is. It could be really surprising how much easier it is to build something that works for you rather than relying on what's already there. And thank you for coming along. There are some QR codes here which you can scan to see various things from us. I would just draw your attention. I said I wouldn't be promoting, but this is my advert, which I've earned with 25 minutes of insight, which is on the left, there is our new AI Culture Audit, which you can answer 10 questions. It takes about 3 minutes, and it will give you a sense of where you are in the AI journey, where you might be stuck, and some practical suggestions about what you can do.